Good afternoon.
For joining in. We're just going to go ahead starting. Mayakun, am I to go ahead?
Oh, yes, I think we are good.
Okay, thank you. All right. So good afternoon, everyone. We are welcome to the webinar on crafting compelling abstracts, how to write clear and captivating summaries. This is going to be a very enlightening session. But before we go on, we're just going to give you an overview of the Gender and Inclusion Summit, as this is part of the learning workshop series of the Gender and Inclusion Summit. I'll be very brief. I will just go ahead sharing my screen. Please, if you can just let me know if you're able to see my screen.
Yes,
Okay.
we can.
All right, thank you so much. So the Gender and Inclusion Summit is going to hold from November 28th to November 29th, 2023. And the theme for this year is a very powerful one: building bridges, advancing gender and inclusion through the intersection of trade and health. The reason why we chose this topic is because we found out that a healthy population is a healthy population. And for example, no matter how much a woman works, for example, the woman that sells something small on the roadside, once she falls ill, she'll most likely have to spend all her income and all her savings that she has kept over the years on her health. And oftentimes we see that they are not able to recover. And we also know that a healthy population is a productive population, and conversely, a productive population is a healthy population. So this just kind of gives us an overview of the thing. So this is just some of the events that we had last year. The Gender and Inclusion Summit was actually conceptualized in 2022 when we identified the need for a platform, that allowed conversations to be held on gender and inclusion across sectors. And last year, it was such a very successful event. And because of this, we knew that we had to make it an annual event. So in terms of how the Gender and Inclusion Summit is structured, as I've earlier said, it will be held November 28th and 29th at the Transcorp Hilton Hotel, Abuja, Nigeria. So it will be a 2-day hybrid event consisting of a physical and a virtual event, comprising of plenary, breakout sessions, oral and poster presentation. The oral and poster presentation is why we are here, as well as skill building workshops, so that we can ensure that all applications for our abstracts are excellently written, and we all stand an equal chance, of presenting at the Gender and Inclusion Summit. So the summit tracks we have this year, about 10, and so we have something on intersectionality in trade and health, addressing gaps in gender inclusive programming. We also have something around adaptive approaches to disability inclusive development. We have something on the care economy. Why should we care? Advancing women's economic empowerment through innovations in the care economy. And even within that, we have some things that we can work with. Another thing we have is something on the digital economy, seeing how technology can be leveraged to advance digital inclusion in trade and health. Very interesting topic there. And we also have something on gender and inclusion in the agricultural value chain, trying to see how missed opportunities for sustainable development can be addressed. That's not all. We also have something for the creative industry as well, advancing best practices and inclusion in the creative and media industry, trying to understand the objectification of women in the creative industry and trying to see how we can bridge the gap, the gender and inclusion gap that exists in the sector. We also have something focused on youth, titled The Future is Now, prioritizing education, learning, and empowerment. Because we also know that education and all this enhances growth. We have something on the role of trade in promoting gender equality and the SDGs. We have something, a subtract on walk the talk, gender inclusiveness in access and utilization of healthcare services. So under this theme, we are going to have conversation on maternal and reducing maternal mortality, health financing and sexual and reproductive health services. And another very, very interesting topic we're going to speak on is something on shifting harmful social norms to advance livelihood and better health outcomes. So for example, we're going to talk about, men as allies, something around this, something about, there's a sub-theme on power, how gender norms shape women's agency and livelihood. And of course, we're going to talk on gender-based violence because we cannot have a gender and inclusion summit without speaking on gender-based violence as well. Okay, so this just gives us an overview of what the summit is about for those of us who did not attend last year, virtually or actually. So for last year, it was a very, very, we had a very good turnout in that we had about 700 participants physically attend, and we had over 9,000 participants, who connected across our virtual platforms. So these are some of the panel sessions. We had a panel session that was held, speakers such as the Minister of Agric, Minister of Finance, the UN Women Country Rep, the the World Bank Country Rep, the Sterling Bank CEO, the Emir of Agungu, and then unfortunately, the Women Affairs Minister was not available, but it was such a very rich event. So this are just pictures from the Gender and Inclusion Summit. This year we have decided to, last year was 1 day, but this year we have decided to scale it upward to 2 days. So for example, we're going to have on day 1, there will be a youth summit. There'll be a youth summit, there'll be plenary sessions, breakout sessions. It's just all going to be very rich. However, before the actual summit, we have this here, the webinars, and we're going to have post-summit events as well. This brings us to the conclusion. These were the team that planned the event last year. So this is just a summary. Thank you. Over, Mayoko.
Thank you so much, Kemi, for giving us highlights of GS 2022, and then also for walking us through what GS 2023 would look like. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mayoko Adedio. I work as a senior policy specialist at the Policy Innovation Center, and I'll be moderating this session today. So before we get started, it is my pleasure to introduce to us our esteemed panelists for today. They are professionals in academia and development. They are also experienced reviewers with local and international journals. I'm sure that they will bring to the fore the wealth of experience they've gathered over the years as regards writing compelling abstracts. So let's take a moment to get to know them better. So I'll start with Dr. Michael Okonoji, and I'm going to hand over to him to introduce himself by giving us, explaining to us what he does and his background. Over to you, Dr. Michael Okonoji.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael Okonoji. I'm an associate professor of sociology. I teach at the University of Lagos, Department of Sociology. And currently, I'm the acting head of department. I've been doing research, both quantitative and qualitative research for approximately 20 years now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Michael Okonoji. I meant it when I said that we have highly esteemed panelists, to dish out to us today what it is to write a compelling abstract. Okay, I think the next panelist will be Dr. Olufunmilayo Banjo. Over to you, Dr. Banjo.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Banjo Olufunmilayo Olufunmilola, and I'm an associate professor at the Department of Demography and Social Statistics of the Obafemi Awolowo University. Presently, I'm the director of the Center for Gender and Social Policy Studies of the university. I have over 15 years experience doing research, both basically quantitatively, although I have some experience in qualitative studies, but mainly I do quantitative studies. And I have a number of studies as regards the issue of gender-based violence, and women empowerment. Those are the areas really specialized. It's good to be with you today, and I'm really hoping that we'll have a good time around the issue of discussion today. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Funmilayo Banjo. So we have one other panelist who will join us shortly, and that's Dr. Osasu Idirisu, who is the Executive Director at the Policy Innovation Center, as well as the Senior Fellow at the Nigerian Economic Summit Group. And I'm so sure that when she comes, she's going to introduce herself more to our participants. So I think we should get started, and then let's get to the meat of the conversation. So we will start with understanding the purpose of an abstract. There are different conceptions and misconceptions about the purpose of crafting abstracts. And then some may say that an abstract is a summary of an article, while some may say that it introduces the article to potential readers or reviewers. So Dr. Kunoji, I would like to start with you. Could you guide us in understanding what an abstract really is and its purposes? Hello, can you hear me?
Sorry, I muted myself. Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes, we can. Thank you.
Oh, okay. So good afternoon once again. There are a number of questions I think we should ask ourselves as we go on. And the first one is, what exactly is an abstract? And the one that follows that is, why is an abstract important? And then after that, we'll also talk briefly about the different types of abstracts. So if I want to be very exact, I'll say simply that an abstract is a summary. An abstract is a summary in the sense that it encapsulates everything that you have in your work. So if you have written a paper, if you have written a journal article, if you have written a thesis, your abstract should summarize that journal article or that dissertation or that report you have written. And because it is a summary, it's a very small summary. Imagine, for instance, that you have a report that is running into tens of pages, sometimes hundreds of pages, and you're expected to summarize that in maybe 250 words or maybe 300 words, or you're expected to summarize in maybe 400 words, then you know that you have a huge task on your hands. It means that you must be as concise as possible. And what exactly do we mean when we say you're concise? It means that you're providing so much information in very few words. To achieve this, there must be no redundancy. That is, you must avoid using words that you can actually do without. So if there is any word, for instance, that you don't necessarily need in your communication, then the ideal thing is that you don't use that word. So you should avoid, for it, look at the examples we have here. If you say the study employed a quantitative survey research method, oh, on the surface, people will say there is no problem with that. But there is a problem because there are too many redundant words in that statement. So you would rather say we conducted a survey. And if you say we conducted a survey, you have lost nothing. Okay. And those who are familiar with these terms know that the moment you're talking about a survey, you're talking about a quantitative method. So it will not be necessary to now spell out and say quantitative survey research. So there are redundant words in that statement. Another example, if you say a perfect example of this is Kano State, yes, that statement looks good, but it is better to say Kano State is a typical case. That way you have reduced the number of words you're using and you have taken away redundancy. Also, it is better to say the unintended consequences, the unintended consequence is, and you move on, rather than the outcome that practitioners neither have in mind nor plan for is blah, blah, blah. Okay, so these are some of the examples of redundancy that easily come to mind. So when writing an abstract, keep in mind that you don't want to use any word that is not necessary. So every word you use in your abstract should be necessary. Okay, so the first thing is that it is concise, and we have talked about that. The second one is that your abstract must be comprehensive, and it is for that reason that you cannot say your abstract is an introduction. The abstract is more than an introduction. The abstract is comprehensive. That is, it must contain everything. It must have a section on the introduction and the background, or the background, depending on what your preference is. And then in that introduction, you will demonstrate familiarity with the literature. And another very important thing is what we call the however, that is identifying the gap. So if you have not got your however, or you have not got or you have not been able to show that you have identified the gap in the literature, then there is a problem with that abstract, because the abstract should clearly show that this study is important. And if there is no gap to fill, then it becomes difficult to prove that it is important. So before you show why the study is important, it's important that you show that you're familiar with the literature, and then you show what exactly the missing link is. What do we not know that the current study intends to make known? But in doing this, you also need to be modest. You should avoid making very categorical statements that suggest that your study is one study that is going to solve all the problems. No, no study is going to do that. Okay, so, and then you should also avoid statements that start with, this is the first study, you never can tell. So you should be modest. And one example here is just to say previous studies have focused on biomedical implications of so, but not the structural barriers which maybe your own study intends to address. Okay, so your abstract should also speak to the how. How exactly are you going about the the research. How exactly are you going about collecting the information? And like we often say, the process is as important, if not more important, than the outcome or the results. So the methods, the materials, the measurements, these are things you may want to talk about in that section. And after that, you will also talk about the results or the findings. If you say results, you're talking about findings, and then your conclusion. So these are major components of a good abstract. So your abstract should be concise and it should be comprehensive. That is, it should not leave out important elements. And of course, as you write, you should think about your audience and also think about the language you're using. Your writing should be attention grabbing. You can't afford to be sloppy. You can't afford to sound boring. You must be captivating. Your language must be appealing, and it must be appealing to the widest possible audience. So as you're writing, you're thinking about the people you're targeting, the people you want to appeal to, and then you carefully choose the language that will appeal to that audience. So all through your writing, you should keep the audience in mind. The language should be crisp and it should be sharp. You shouldn't write in a way that people will not find interesting. Okay, and then the question that we should quickly ask before I end is, why is your abstract important? It is a quick way to communicate your research to people. So for that reason, it's important that you have a very strong, a very powerful abstract. And then your abstract is your case. It is your argument. It is based on that case. It's like going to court where you will be judged, and then they're asking you, make your case. If you have a bad case, you will be judged based on the case you have presented. So decisions will be made based on the abstract that you have put forward, the decision on whether to read your work or not to read your work. For instance, maybe your article may be up to 7,000 words. But before I read 7,000 words, before I decide whether to spend my time reading 7,000 words, I want to be convinced that this is worth my time. So decisions will be made on the abstracts you have written. People will decide on whether they want to read or not. If it's for a conference or for this kind of thing we're doing, people will decide whether they want to accept, the panel will decide whether they want to accept your abstract or your submission based on that maybe 250 word abstract or not. Whether they're going to invite you to a conference or to an event, your abstracts will determine. So that is. And also, you should note that for most people, that's the only thing they read. People don't read so much. That's the only thing. In fact, some people who will cite your work eventually will only read your abstract and maybe read the conclusions. Or if you're lucky, they will read the results section. Okay, so the implication is that you can't afford to get it wrong when you're writing your abstract, because there won't be a second chance. They have just maybe 4 or 5 minutes to make up their minds on your work. So you should keep this in mind. And your abstracts can have different purposes. They can be informative, they can be descriptive. Typically, the abstracts that we asked for will be the informative abstract that will have all the sections that we have talked about. But it's possible to have a descriptive abstract that doesn't go beyond the results section. And it's also possible to have a critical or evaluative abstract that will go all the way and provide detailed information about the process, about the methods. And then you can also categorize your abstracts on whether there are sections or not. In some abstracts, you have clear sections, which means that you break the abstracts down into sections: background, methods, results, conclusion. Then others are written in just one paragraph, no sections at all. And then you can also have abstracts for different types of writing for your journal article. You could have a conference abstract. You could have an abstract for your thesis. You could have a report that will have, well, so most reports have executive summaries rather than abstracts because the abstracts usually is shorter than the executive summary. So this is what your abstract should look like. And you should keep these things in mind. Don't ever go beyond the word limit. If you have 250 words, don't write 251 words. That can disqualify you. If sections are required, provide sections. If you're expected to write in just one paragraph, write in one paragraph. And then sometimes we ask whether keywords are necessary or not. If you are required to put keywords, add keywords. If you're not required to add keywords, don't add keywords. The keywords are used maybe by search engines, especially where proper indexing is done. And then the last question is, when should you write your abstract? Is it before you do the work or the research, or while doing it, or after? And the answer is the abstract is the last thing to write. It is not the first thing. Thank you. I'll stop here for now.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kunuji, for that detailed explanation around what an abstract is. And I was just, trying to think within myself when you were talking about different types of abstracts, and then the rules, that one needs to, take cognizance of when writing abstracts. And I'm so sure that we would, dig a bit more into these conversations. So I think right now, because you started talking about different components of an abstract, so I would like to turn it over to Dr. Banjo to, tell us in detail, the key components of an abstract, like thinking about Dr. Kunuji mentioned having background, introduction. So if you are to just limit it to just a background and introduction for now. So and objectives, would you just walk us through what we should expect when writing this?
Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Oh, yes, we can.
Okay. So, good afternoon. I think I want to say well done to Dr. Kunuji for making my own job simpler or easier. So I have been asked to do justice to, the key components, especially the background and the research objectives or questions of an abstract. Sorry, I don't know why this is not in slideshow. Okay, I think it's better now.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so these are the key components of an abstract: the background and content, the research objectives or questions, the methodology or approach, the key findings or results, then the conclusions or implications. So either you are writing a structured or unstructured abstract, the format of an abstract follows strictly these 5 steps. The background, and it depends on the number of words, okay? Just like I've put down here, that how much of each of the stated components goes into your abstract depends on the required number of words you need to submit. Maybe you are to write a 100-word abstract, a 150-word abstract, a 200-word abstract, or a 250-word, 350-word, 400, and so on and so forth. And in some cases, especially for conference submissions you have an extended abstract. You are asked to submit an extended abstract. Apart from the abstract, the short abstract, you are asked to submit. You are also expected to submit up to 2-page abstracts. Sometimes the organizers will request for maybe 4 pages max, but usually it is 2 pages. You have 2 pages of extended abstracts. But here today, I'm not going to talk about an extended abstract, but just to let you know that aside from the short word abstract, you also must know about extended abstracts. Then how to write an abstract. Dr. Kunuji did justice to this. I'm not going to waste much time on it. What's the W&H model of writing an abstract? What exactly did you do or did your study address? For how long did you do it? Where did you carry out the study? And what is the purpose? Or is there anything new your study added to the body of the existing literature? And the method, that is very, very important. How exactly did you collect your data? Did you analyze? Then the results presented. So for background and content, I have a number of illustrations here based on the number of words required for abstracts submitted. You know, I just tried to pick this from some of the studies I've authored or co-authored. In the background, basically, what you need to do is to put your own study in context. What is it, or what are those things that have been done? What is the new thing you are trying to bring in? Or what are the gaps in the previous studies, and what exactly, or how do you intend to fill that gap? That must be clearly stated in your own study. What am I communicating? These are pertinent questions you need to ask yourself when you are writing an abstract, especially the background and the content. And please don't forget that the background and the objectives, they are usually, you know, in most studies, you have the two in a statement, you know, usually together. I'm going to quickly run through these illustrations, and you will see different studies based on the number of required words. Okay, the first illustration I have here says, many empirical studies have assessed the effects of adults' HIV infection on their livelihood. However, the effect of children's HIV status on their educational outcomes during adolescence has not been adequately investigated. So that is, you know, providing a background, a context to aid the new study. So now we move on to the objective. That is the first illustration in a 200-word abstract. The second one is a 350-word abstract. And that's, you know, you have more than enough number of words as the background to situate your own study. It says grand multiparity and low contraceptive prevalence are dominant among Nigerian women. This elevates the risk of unintended pregnancies, high-risk fertility, and adverse maternal and child health outcomes among women in the country, particularly grand multiparous women. Studies have examined predictors of intentions to use modern contraceptives among women of reproductive age. However, these studies did not ascertain the extent to which grand multiparity is associated with intentions to use modern contraceptives, you know, trying to situate the present study in the existing body of literature. Then for 150-word abstract, decision-making autonomy as a component of women's status is a less studied indicator of fertility behavior in Nigeria. This study and so on. Then a 100-word abstract says there is scarce information on relationship between women's empowerment and completed fertility in most of Sub-Saharan African countries, including Nigeria. So this study and so on. So I say that there is a strong link between research objectives and questions. So you may want to ask, when do you use either? When do you use a research question or an objective? questions are more appropriate when you are writing a proposal, although the two are often included in students' proposal, especially for those of us in the academia. So for a concluded study, it is better to state the objectives in your abstract or the overall aim of your study based on the number of words you have been asked to present. Okay? So for research questions are basically addressing what problems your research intends to solve. What is the scope of the study and what is the main argument? You know, in some cases, you may be asked to just present a broad question then. And in some cases, you may have to break down the questions, the overall question, break down into bits. I also say that it is important to make your research question very clear as much as possible. Either you are using a research question, a research objective, you must be very clear and you must put the audience into consideration. Then research objective is stating what exactly your study addressed. You may state it as the overall aim or the objectives. Maybe you have one, you have two, up to three will still be accommodated. Then making it very concise and clear is very, very important. Dr. Kunoji also made mention of this. And, you know, from the previous illustrations, I tried to move on. For a 200-word abstract, the study aims to evaluate, you know, effect of household members' HIV infection and that of children on their educational outcome during adolescence. That is the main objective of that study. Then the other one, that of grand multiparity. So this study examined association between grand multiparity and intention to use modern contraceptives in Nigeria. For the 150-word abstract, the study utilizes this to determine women's characteristics associated with decision-making autonomy and examine the influence of decision-making autonomy on fertility behavior among currently married women in Nigeria. And the last one, a 100-word abstract, this study examined the modulating effect of religion on the relationship between women's empowerment and completed fertility among married women or women in union age 45 to 49. Using that is talking about methods. Okay, so I think that is what I have.
Yes. Thank you so much. That also helps, you know, trying to let us know that we need to put our abstracts in context and then also talk about the kind of problem we are trying to solve and then how this will tie to the objectives. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Banjo.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, so before we proceed, I would just like our participants to know that if you have questions, you know, you can type in your questions in the chat box. I'm so sure that we'll address them after these presentations. So when Dr. Banjo was talking, one of our panelists also joined. That's Dr. Osasui Tirisu. And then my next question is really for her, but then I would want her to, you know, introduce herself and also answer this question. So Dr. Banjo started talking about the different components of an abstract, and then she dwelt on having background and then also objectives. So I would like Dr. Dirisu to also talk more on this by really focusing on other components of an abstract. Say, for instance, you know, it's possible, are we going to have methodology immediately after the objectives and all of that? Over to you, Dr. Dirisu. If you are speaking, I think you're on mute. Dr. Dirisu, please, if you are speaking, you're on mute. Okay, thank you. So while we would allow Dr. Disu to settle in, I think one of our panelists has a question for Dr. Kunoji. Sorry, 1 minute. So I think the person is asking that in a critical or evaluative abstract. Oh, so this is the question. What is the difference or similarities between an abstract and research proposal? Dr. Kunoji, this question is for you.
Okay, so on the question of what the difference is between an abstract and a research proposal is a statement of intent. So if you say you're proposing something, it means that you're expressing what you intend to do. So if you're writing a proposal, in fact, you can have a proposal, you can have a short proposal that will not be more than a couple of pages. You can also have a proposal that will run into several, maybe several pages. The proposal will have information about it, will have background information, it will have your objectives, that is what you're setting out to find out, and it will also have, in fact, a good proposal is judged by its section on methods, because that's what people are interested in seeing. What or how do you hope to achieve what you want to achieve? Okay, so that's a proposal. If you say you're writing a proposal, it means you're expressing your intent. I want to find this out, and this is how I will go about finding it out. But in your proposal, you must also have a very strong justification. You must clearly show that it is important to do that study. Okay, so that's a proposal, but an abstract is a summary. So it's even possible that your proposal has an abstract. It's possible, for instance, that you have a summary, because let's not mince words. An abstract is a summary. Is a summary of something you have written. So if you write a proposal, you can write an abstract that will summarize all you have proposed. But the difference is that if you're writing that type of abstract, you can only have maybe expected findings because you're yet to do the study, because it's an abstract to cover a proposal. So you can have expected findings, and then so you can't also be exact because you don't know yet what you will find out. Okay.
Oh,
So an
all right.
abstract is different from a proposal.
Oh, thank you so much for that wonderful response. I think there is another question. And this question is also to you, Dr. Kunoji. In a critical, evaluative abstract, how can you ensure to keep your words crisp, since you're expected to do a more detailed and rigorous analysis?
Yes. So the how is from experience. So you learn to write a good abstract from experience by practicing, and also by reading abstracts written maybe by more senior people. And the truth is, there is nothing you can say in maybe 200 words. There is nothing. The solution is that you have the words. You must have the vocabulary. So sometimes people struggle with this because they don't have the words. What you will say in 10 words, another person can actually say in 1 word or in 2 words. Okay, so I think that's one thing we want to work on. For instance, those who are into clinical practice will be familiar with the term nosocomial. If you talk about maybe nosocomial infection, you're talking about those infections that people pick within the hospital environment. Well, if you don't have that one word and you're writing, you may end up describing the same thing using up to maybe 10 words. But just one word can capture it. Okay. So, and if you do it in sentence one, you do it in sentence two, you don't have the right words, you're using so many redundant words, or you don't have the right vocabulary, then your work will end up being unnecessarily long. And if the abstract is too long, it becomes boring, it becomes uninteresting, people don't want to read it. So the way forward is add to your vocabulary, be familiar with the terms that are used in that area, and then know how to use them. It's going to help you.
All right, thank you so much for that wonderful response, Dr. Kunoji. I mean, one thing that I got from your response is that you should not write a boring abstract. Okay, this is a tall call and tall order. All right, thank you so much for that wonderful response. So we would hand over to Dr. Dirisu at this moment. So I would just like her to expatiate or talk around the different components of an abstract, focusing on methodology, findings, and conclusion. Over to you, Doctor. But first, I think it will be good for you for us to know.
Okay, thank you. My name is Osasu Idirisu. I'm the Executive Director of the Policy Innovation Center. I'm truly happy to be here, and thank you for making time to join us on this webinar. We really look forward to receiving abstracts on this conference, but also you using this to subsequently prepare abstracts for other conferences. Okay, I would like permission to share my screen. Sorry, I'm not like my academic orgas, so I don't have a PowerPoint, but I'll just go straight and share a few examples from some methods and papers I've written just to guide this conversation. All right. So first of all, in capturing your methods, your results, and your conclusions, the first thing to be cognizant of is you're always going to, except like Dr. Banjo said, you're doing an extended abstract, you're always going to be stuck with 300 words or 250 words or 350 words, usually at the max. So the first thing you're thinking about is asking yourself the question, what is the most important finding? What, in terms of thinking about my method, let me start with the method. So in terms of thinking about your method, you're asking yourself, what did I do? And I'm going to show you some examples briefly where you would see that you should be able to write your methods in 2 sentences max, sometimes stretch it to 3 sentences, and we'll just look at what the structure of the sentences would really be linked to, first of all, saying who you engaged with, if you engage with people, remember you did interviews, you did a survey, like that overarching approach. And then the next sentence, if you use a framework or if you use any specific strategy you need to mention. And then the third thing is, after you did your what you did, either it's a program you're reporting or research you're reporting, how did you analyze the findings and bring them together? Because we also, I know this has been mentioned, just to point out here that even if you're presenting like findings or something, like evidence from a program that you have done. So sometimes it's research, but sometimes you're presenting evidence from some programmatic work you've done. It still follows the same approach in your method. You spoke to people, so you engaged people. And then how did you engage them? What method or strategy did you use to engage them? And then finally, how did you analyze or bring together that conversation? So I'll just quickly share my screen. So I take you through 3 examples quickly. Okay.
We can see.
Okay, can you see a paper?
Yes, we can see, we can see it.
Okay, so you can see a paper. So you can see background methods, results, and conclusions.
Exactly, yes, we can see.
Okay, great. So quickly, if you look at the methods, and I'm just highlighting it with my cursor, just so that I'm focused. So this was a paper where I think this was 350 words. So you can see the first sentence talks about who are engaged with. So 19 sexually active men who have sex with men and 18 female sex workers aged 16 to 18. So you see how to bring, conciseness to your work. So I needed to talk about their ages. I needed to talk about who they were. So I said age 16 and older. What did they do? What was peculiar to them? They all use substances. How did I select them purposively? And what did they do to participate in 16 in-depth interviews and 2 focus groups? So the next sentence, I talked about how we engaged on that project. So we used a framework, and what we were trying to do was to understand socioeconomic factors, substance use, and high-risk sexual practices. So after I got all this information, what did I do with the information? We audio recorded the interviews, we transcribed the interviews, we organized in NVivo and analyzed using thematic analysis. So just from this summary alone, and I'm happy to share some examples, that can be sent to our email. So just from these 3 concise sentences, we have talked about the people. So your method is not complete without spotlighting who you engage with. Maybe you had a dialogue with key stakeholders in Edo State, or you spoke to teenagers, 100 teenagers. You have to mention the number. Typically, you mention the age. So give us some demographic understanding, and then give us, an insight into what you did. So that's really what the method is about. I will run through the rest, and I will share a couple of examples at the end. Then when you want to talk about your results, this is also another very tricky one. And don't beat yourself too hard. Sometimes it takes like 20 iterations to get a concise. So when I first wrote these results, I think maybe it was like maybe 300 words. Then you shorten and shorten and shorten and shorten until you get into that word limit. But it's not just also about the word limit. You also want to ensure that you have projected your results, because if somebody is looking at your abstract, will they be interested in, what would be their interest? How do you want the results to show? How do you want to ensure that people can see your results and see the punchy, focused nature of that work that will now make them want to read, further? So you can see in projecting your results, you also start with the demographics. So the demographics now is telling you exactly what you found. So, for example, if you're looking at teenage pregnancy, you're looking at, something to do with HIV prevalence, or you're looking at the number of people who are inclined to a certain behavior, or if you're speaking to women, the number of women who think that decision making should be joint. So you start your results by giving us that summary demography. So which is what you can see here. So majority, in bracket 95%, were non-injecting substance users, in bracket primarily alcohol, and then a few. So you are now bringing those results. What were the ages? You talk about that of people in this demography from what you found. Then you now begin to break down the findings. So what is typically good is to have a piece of paper where you've written, so what are the 5 key takeaways from my work? Number 1, you write it. Number 2, just on a piece of paper. Then you now put it into a sentence. So for this one, as an example, I found out that social networks influence the use of substances. I found out that the use of substances was used as a coping strategy for people who engaged in sex work and sexual activities. So those were 2 things around why they use the drugs. Then around the risk, I found a couple of things there, which I listed as multiple sexual partners. So what HIV risks do my population have? So one was multiple sexual partnerships, another one was condomless sex, transactional sex, intergenerational sex, double penetration, women, and sexual violence. So these were the risks. So three things. So I broke my findings into three. So the first was in terms of what influenced their use of drugs. The second one was what risk drivers resulted from their use of drugs. And then the third one was what sort of issues exacerbate, what are the other general issues like socioeconomic issues that exacerbated the use. So you now begin to summarize that. So because I didn't have space, this is not the time to start writing that condomless sex means this, transactional sex means this, for multiple sexual partnership, they did this and this. There's no time for this. The actual work, the actual presentation will speak to that. So all you just do is begin to bring them into cohesive sentences. So they use substances as a coping strategy for both physical and emotional issues. So I combine physical and emotional because there's no space to talk about them separately, okay? And then brought all the risk drivers into one sentence. So you should be able to, in writing your results, think about a way of bringing that concise focus of bringing all the different things you're looking at into one, and then finally ended by talking about poverty and socioeconomic conditions as the drivers of higher risk practices, as the case may be. Then your conclusion and recommendations. When you come to your conclusion and recommendations, you're trying to ensure that you are speaking to not the problem anymore. Because sometimes we read abstracts and we see that people are concluding and retelling us the problem. No, you already gave us the problem in your background, and your results spoke a bit to what the problem is. So when you're doing the conclusion and recommendations, you are now, first of all, in the first sentence, you can just highlight the problem again, but more from I'm giving you the solution point of view. So you can say something like, so in this study, we found out that women who want to engage in governance are more likely to have agency, or they are more likely to have become student union presidents in university. So you give us that brief. Then the next sentence now starts talking about how does this impact on my topic? So these issues impact on HIV prevention, which is what I'm interested in. So I'm linking the problem now to what the potential solution or my end result should be like. And then finally, I now tell you, if you are doing HIV programs for these people, you must consider this. It will yield better results if you do A, B, C, D, E. Because of time, I'll just quickly stop sharing and then just share, one more example that just still highlights, what we've been talking about. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. So, and then sometimes some people, when you're writing abstract, sometimes they will want you to bring all your findings together in one. Other times they will want you to break it down into background. So the reason why I'm writing it like this is because that's what they wanted. In our call, we will ask you to write it the previous way. But this is just to highlight, another example. So here you can see the methods. Okay, this was a much shorter abstract. I think they wanted 200 words. So we conducted 23 in-depth interviews with MSM, to explore perceptions about this. So you write it, and then, in fact, I actually wrote my methods in one sentence because that was what they wanted. Okay, I didn't even have the opportunity to write about how I analyze the data, but the previous one I shared is like the standard. And then I now went on to talk about, what the findings were, just like I showed you there, the results. So this was acceptable because it was HIV self-testing was acceptable because it was considered A, B, C, D, E, and then highlighted what people's concerns are. And then going straight to the recommendations and conclusions, which is the high point of your work, just went on to say one-on-one peer distribution strategies facilitate pickup. So overall, the findings suggest that HIV programs incorporate this will improve this. So just to round up my, because I see my time is almost up, when you're now thinking about bringing your conversation together, your last sentence must highlight the highest points of your entire work. So overall, it is important, it is critical. So you use those sort of words. It is important, it is critical to consider, to incorporate issues relating to women empowerment. It's important to, so you are bringing that punchy sentence to ensure that people end your abstract on a high. If I read your abstract, sometimes people get to conclusions and start telling stories. So after they write it, you say, from what we are looking at, we think that people should do A, B, C, D, E. No. You want something punchy. You're trying to sell. It's like, when they say you want to sell markets, so your value proposition or that's 30 seconds opportunity to sell your abstract by ensuring that we see that there is a solution to the problem. So your last sentence must be solution focused, giving us that punchy solution to the problems that you have been talking about since you started your background. I'll stop here for now.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dirisu. That was concise yet powerful. Okay, so I think she was talking about if you want to write your methods, you need to think about what did you do. You need to include your demographic. Give explanation the demography that you spoke to, and then the approach for engagement, and also what did you find in terms of key takeaways, and then conclusion in terms of potential solutions and recommendations. Thank you so much, Dr. Dirisu. So I still want us to really dwell a bit more on crafting clear and engaging abstracts. Previous panelists have talked about the importance of, drafting very clear, concise, complete, and cohesive abstracts. So I would like to ask Dr. Banjo to highlight tips for writing clear and concise sentences when writing abstracts.
Sorry, I need to share my screen because I don't struggle with. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me continue from where I stopped. Tips for writing clear and concise sentences. We have been told that abstract, if not structured, are usually written in a single paragraph and should consist of detailed summary of what the study is all about. No redundant statements. Sometimes you write an abstract, you just have to continue to cut until you get the required number of words. Is an art that we have to learn. Dr. Kunuji, I remember he said that you just have to continue to train yourself. You learn over and over and over again. Having to write a 100-word abstract is, at some point, I had to sit down to say what do I really want to include. A 100-word abstract is very, very small and short. So don't also forget that you have to write your abstract at the end of the whole process of your research. After the study must have been, in fact, it's the last thing. Incidentally, we are not dealing with titles now. I think abstracts, the abstract and the titles are usually the very last thing. Even if you have a working title, sometimes at the end of the whole study, you may have to change the title. Likewise, abstract. Perhaps you have even written some things and you discover that there are some redundancies, then you have to let go of those things. Sometimes you feel, oh, this word is very, very important. I don't want to let go of it, but when you don't have enough space to do that, you have to let go of some words. So the 4 C's of writing an abstract. Number 1 is complete. Make sure you write complete sentences. You should avoid too long sentences. Avoid redundant words. Avoid redundant statements. Then it must be cohesive. There must be a flow from the beginning to the end of that abstract, especially if it's a 1-paragraph abstract. Ensure that one sentence flows one to another. Just like that, it's like telling a story. Like the whole research is like telling a story. Likewise, the abstract is like telling a story. Nobody or not many people will be able to read the whole of your work, but it is what is included in the abstract that will really motivate them, whether they need to continue or to drop reading your work. So it must also be concise. Make sure the whole abstract is telling a very clear story, no ambiguity. And you must ensure that you write in a way that is very clear to your readers. Your readers must be, they must really understand what you are saying. Use captivating words, use appealing languages to really get their attention. And I also include what should not be included in an abstract. There should be no citations in an abstract, no definition of terms, and no references. So it is important to master the art of an abstract writing. I know it is important to start. Rome was not built in a day. You cannot be perfect in a day. So you have to continue to do it over and over again. For some of us who have published a number of articles in different journal outlets, you discover that even though there are different structures by journals, the whole process is one. Everything, just saying what is important, what your study is all about, give captivating results. Abstract is not a place where you need to, tell the whole results of your study. You just have to pick 1 or 2 captivating ones, especially those that really fills the gap you have identified in the literature around that study. And we have the different types of abstracts: the structured, the unstructured, the descriptive, and the informative. It is important to know that all abstracts share common components, irrespective of the type. So don't forget, it only depends on how many words you have to say this. So the structured abstract has a 4-point structure: the background or the objective, the method, the result, and the conclusion. And the descriptive abstracts are usually very short, between 75 and 150 words, and must abide by the strict compliance to the main thrust of the research, with little or no details, just straight to the point. I think I've shared some illustration in the previous presentation. The informative abstract may be structured or unstructured and must give complete detailed summary of the research.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Banjo. Writing is an art. You need to be consistent. No citations when writing abstracts, no definition of terms, no references. Thank you so much. And just in maybe 3 or 4 minutes, I know that this is a tall order, and then this is going directly to Dr. Dirisu. So I would like her to provide to our participants strategies for making an abstract engaging and then attention grabbing, just in about 2 to 3 minutes.
Mayoko, you said 3 to 4 now, 2 to 3. Okay, I'll try my best. So I think the first thing with making your abstract attention grabbing is your title. Please spend as much time on the abstracts as on the body of the abstract as you spend reflecting on the title. So I'm a social scientist, so a lot of the work I do most times is qualitative. So one of the ways I help myself is I go to the data and see if there's a very important punchy quote. So giving voice to my participants. So I see if there's a very important punchy quote I can actually get from the research, that can be that title or something one of my participants said. So a few things, I've done in the past is just go in and look at, so someone says, there's a paper that we're just about publishing, and he says, it was something around HIV, and, one of our participants says, I take the drugs to make the HIV go out of me. And so I just titled the paper like that. And, after that, so there are two parts to a title. So you first want to, if it's qualitative, you want to give voice, for example, to your participants. So like this example I gave, but then tell us what you did. So I take the drugs to make the HIV go out of me. Then I put a colon and said perspectives of, HIV, something like that, after that. So your title must be attention grabbing. And I mean, you guys know how it is done, some common phrases I'll drop here just to get you thinking. So something like walking the talk, from talk to action, nudging, building bridges, which we are using for our work this year. Or sometimes if it's just the title, you put it in, but bring some juxtaposition. So if your findings reflect a paradox, you can say, for example, the paradox of financial inclusion without a digital ID, so spend some time thinking about the title. When I look at the title of your work, if it's, shy away from an assessment of women and men or a survey of men and women, please bring your title alive. Let it speak life to the work that you have done. So that's one. Secondly, pay attention to your opening and closing sentence. So the background, you want to highlight the problem. Give it to us punchy. So Nigeria had the highest maternal under 5 mortalities for four straight years in a row. So you're talking about, this is a paper that is speaking, for example, or this abstract is speaking about the burden of maternal health or the burden of, so give us something to want to continue to read. So when I see that, Nigeria has had the highest for 4 years in a row, or Nigeria is the second highest. So it doesn't always have to be bad, please. It could be also a positive thing. Nigeria has consistently led, maybe you're writing something around the creative industry. You can say Nigeria has the second highest, whatever, Nollywood something in the world globally. So you open your sentence on a high. And then people want to see, okay, so what's coming next? So that opening sentence, and then your last sentence, so when you bring everything together, end in a way, because that's the last thing that your reviewer is going to read as per your abstract. So let the last sentence also bring it together. So based on everything I have said, it is important now to consider Nollywood as the #1 destination for filmmaking in the world. So when you think about your grabbing attention, please, it starts with your title. The title is, once a reviewer says an assessment, a this, or it's, just something very flat, no life, no excitement, then they're going to be less inclined to read that. You start on a high. When you go to your background, let the first sentence be a punchy sentence that opens up. And then finally, just within the body of your write-up, try to avoid using long, loose sentences that don't, so make sure that all your sentences are concise. And finally, just make sure that when you're ending, you end on a high. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dirisu. So, I mean, one thing that I got from this is really that for your abstract to be attention grabbing, you really need to pay attention to your title. Thank you so much for that wonderful response. So, I mean, just to go back to Dr. Kunoji, in maybe a few sentences, any final words on making your abstract to be attention grabbing? Hello, Dr. Kunoji. If you are speaking, I think you're on mute.
Yes, sorry, I just noticed that. Okay, so I'd like to quickly talk about the voice, the type of sentence you're using. Are you using passive sentences or you're using active sentences? And that takes us a little into English grammar. In grammar, we say a sentence typically, not in all cases, but typically a sentence will have a subject and a predicate. So if you like, say a verb. Now, it's possible to frame your sentence in such a way that the subject, that is the doer of the action, comes before the verb. And it's also possible to frame your sentence in such a way that the doer of the action is actually receiving the action. For instance, I can say, okay, so let me see if I can share this example so that we're all on the same page. If you say you have an active sentence, it means that the doer is coming before the predicate or the action. For instance, you can say the MDA is optimized the opportunity to scale up the intervention. That's in active voice because the MDA, the subject in this case, is coming before the action that is taken, optimized the opportunity, whatever. But you can also recast this in a passive way, such that the doer of the action is actually receiving the action. That is, it is coming after it. So you can say the opportunity to scale up the intervention was optimized by the MDAs. Now, it is better to use the active voice than to use the passive voice in writing. This may require sometimes that you use the singular or the plural pronoun I or we in writing. We did this. I did that if it's a study you did all by yourself. If it's a collaborative study, you want to say, we did this. Okay, in the past, people had a problem with that style of writing, but that has become the norm today. You write in the active voice, and it is sharper, it's easier to follow than when you're writing in the passive, using the passive voice. So that's one thing I want us to note. The other thing is to avoid jargons. Avoid anything that will make people say, what is this guy saying? Okay, so you need to be clear. Don't try to impress anybody. Don't try to confuse people. Sometimes you want to confuse people, try to confuse people. And at other times, people are trying to be evasive. All these things will not work. So if you're writing your abstract, don't try to impress anyone, don't try to confuse anyone, and don't try to be evasive. Be as clear as possible. Then ask yourself, this term I am using, will my audience understand it? If no, then avoid that term. In some journals now, they even ask that you write a plain language summary, that is a plain language abstract of your work. Strive as much as possible to make your language so that the ordinary person out there can understand what you're writing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kunoji, for that wonderful response. I think it's now time for us to be putting down our questions and dropping them in the chat box. If we have questions, quickly do that. So as mentioned by my colleague earlier, that's Kemi. So one of the prominent features of GS 2023 Summit is abstract submission, and then we have identified guidelines for writing and submission for those people that are interested in submitting abstract for the summit. So I will invite my colleague Jessica to present in just about 2 minutes the guidelines for abstract writing and submission for GS 2023. And so these are the guidelines the reviewers will work with to score our abstracts. Over to you, Jessica.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. So I'll quickly run through I'll share my screen shortly. Okay, can everyone see my screen, please?
Yes.
All
Yes,
right,
please.
thank you. Yes, so this is just an abstract sample. So you start off with the title, presenting author, contributing authors, name of organization, the summit track. The summit track is downloadable on the website. And so as Dr. Banji put us through, your abstract should be a single paragraph. Yeah, so we'll just quickly run through the word limit. So the limit is 300 words minimum and 350 words maximum. And then also you have to send your biography, not more than 50 words, just as the sample down here, as you can see. And then your abstract title should not exceed 30 words. And also 10 to 15 abstracts will be given the opportunity to have an oral presentation at the summit, and certificates will be issued to all accepted abstracts, and then all abstracts also will be included into the book of abstracts. Yeah, so every other information needed will be available on the website. So please do well to check it out. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jessica. So I'm so certain that in the course of the conversations, we all have different questions running through our mind. So I think I would like to start by asking, let's say, Dr. Kunoji, what type of abstract is good for an intended proposal in just about one sentence? Because we are pressed for time. Over.
Yes, a proposal should have a descriptive abstract. And that question has been recurring. Can you write an abstract for a proposal? Yes, you can. The question you should ask is, can you summarize it? Once you can summarize that piece of writing, you can have an abstract for it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kunoji. So I think I would like to ask Dr. Banjo. So somebody is asking, how do you write an abstract for a proposal or research that is yet to be done or yet to be conducted? Dr. Banjo, over to you in just about 2 sentences.
Yeah, I think it's similar to what Dr. Kunoji said earlier, that once you can summarize it, at least you have the method section, you have the background, you have the objectives or the research questions your study intends to answer. Then sometimes you may put expected outcome. You are expecting that, okay, based on the identified gaps, this is what you expect from the findings of this study. So then maybe you may not be able to make a recommendation since the study has not been conducted, but at least up to that point, you should be able to give a summary.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Banjo. So somebody is asking, will participants get recordings of this webinar? Oh, yes. So the video will be made available on our YouTube. So you can go to our YouTube to download any of this video if you are interested. Okay. So I think that is about it. I'm not sure if we have any other questions. Okay. I think lastly, this is for Dr. Dirisu. So please, I was to know if it is important to interpret the result after presenting them in the abstract, keeping in mind the word count of 250. Doctor, this is for you.
Okay, thank you. The question is not very clear, but just from my understanding, and we can follow up on this later, by the time you're writing the abstracts, so if you're writing a prospective abstract, so that's an abstract for work that hasn't been done, you are not going to write results. For example, you just say, more like expected outcomes or, things just like Dr. Banjo has said. But if you have already done the work and you're writing an abstract, you're writing the abstracts based on the results. But like I told you earlier, it's just to ask yourself what the 3 or 4 most important findings are, just write them as phrases. And then when you write them as phrases or short sentences, you can write results in one sentence. I mean, the shortest abstract ever is E equals MC squared. And that was it, just a mathematical equation. So yes, as concisely as possible, is you just 1 sentence, 2 sentences, you can bring it in, and it takes practice to do that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dirisu, for that wonderful response. So just to let our participants know that we have series of webinars lined up for us as we build.
Sorry, Mayoko, so sorry, there's a couple of questions that have come up, please, just like in the last couple of minutes. Let me just support. So Ifeanyi is saying, do we have abstracts for proposals or only finished product publications? So typically when you write proposals, so there are two different things to quickly differentiate. If you're writing a proposal, you typically not write an abstract, you would write of what you intend to do. So when you publish your protocol for research, yes, as part of that process, you're going to write an abstract. In that abstract, you follow the format that we have talked about, but you are futuristic in the way you craft, because you don't have results yet, so you're really writing around what you expect to find, what you would see, and all that. In terms of citation standards for research proposals, that's a bit outside the scope of this, and you don't require that for what we're talking about here. But let Dr. Kuniji is typing an answer, so I rest my case on that. But for the other question, yes, you can have abstracts for protocols and for finished publications. But typically, when you're writing a proposal, you don't write an abstract. You would write, a summary, an executive summary of your work, talking about intended outcomes.
Oh, thank you so much for that, Dr. Dirisu. I'm not sure if we can accommodate more questions. So this is just to thank our participants for joining and for listening in. So as I was mentioning the other time, that we have series of webinar lined up for us as we build to the summit. So we would like you to check our website and other social media handles to get update on these webinars. So on behalf of the management of the Policy Innovation Center, we would like to appreciate our panelists, for creating time out of their busy schedule to give us these detailed explanations on abstracts, how to write a compelling abstract, and also to our participants for creating time to join the webinar today. Thank you so much, and have a restful day.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. Have a good day. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Banjo and Dr. Kunuji. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bye.
Welcome. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Try to make money. Ife.
Well done, ma.
Well done.